Hi, I'm Brigette. I'm an alcoholic. It's an honor to be here, and I'm grateful to be sober. I've been through the process with a couple of Big Book Step Study sponsors and a loving God, and I'm more than halfway through 9, and I practice 10, 11, and 12. This process, that's okay. It's an anonymous program. Yeah. It doesn't matter. This process saved my life. I came into it after having been sober 24 years and doing steps in the way that I was exposed to doing the steps before I found out about Big Book Step Study. I had reached a sober bottom that felt worse than my alcoholic bottom, because I was thinking that even AA had failed me and God had failed me, because if I was doing everything right and going to meetings and service and everything like that, why did I feel so horrible? There was tons of outside drama going on, which only reflected my inside spiritual bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And I had been seeking God, but I was seeking what I wanted more than that. I just going to calm myself down for a second by sharing my favorite quote from the Big Book. Well, there's so many, but it's on page 28, and it says, it's the second paragraph down. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. And when I was writing my fourth step, I had that on a piece of paper on my visor, because I felt like it was a flimsy reed, and it did prove to be the loving and powerful hand of God, which I only discovered by taking the action. You know, my idea was to pray and feel better and then do it, but that didn't work too well for me. Like a lot of things, I've changed things in my head without even knowing it, and that is why the fifth step has really saved my life, because I believed myself and I believed my stories, and they were so ingrained in me that, as it says, we can't tell truth from lies. I was in the rooms and listening to people share, and I asked a woman to listen to my fifth step. And I would leave from doing my fifth step with a headache, like my brain was having surgery, because I was like, what does that even mean? And sometimes I would just want to argue. And it was not about arguing and explaining the drama behind it and all the reasons why. And she was perfect for me because she held my feet to the fire. I'm a big talker. I've had years of therapy. I can talk my way out of just about anything. And she got my number. And thank God, because that is why this process saves our lives. If I could have been saved by thinking about God or reading a book or all the thousands of dollars in therapy, I would not have felt suicidal at 24 years sober, facing a divorce and a foreclosure, losing my job, and my kids didn't like me, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. It was a spiritual bankruptcy based on self-will run riot from the get-go. So I'm not beating myself up here, and that's not what 4 and 5 is about. It's just the truth. It's just the truth that it is a life and death disease. My mother, way smarter than me. She's a brilliant woman, way more faith than me, nicer about horrible people than me on my best day sober, and she drank herself to death. And so it just goes to show that it isn't about intelligence, and it's not even about sitting in the church praying. It's about the whole package. And this was terrifying to me. This fifth step, this part of the package, was terrifying. But I also didn't want to die, and I didn't want to be miserable. And that is why it's 5 after 1, 2, 3, and 4. I know I'm not going to do a step-a-log, but if I don't experience that first step of knowing that this is a fatal disease, why put myself through the work that it does take? If I don't know that I'm insane, why would I want to know how to get better? And if I don't take a third step and give my life to God, then I'm still going to be trying to do my 4th step my way and my 5th step my way and pick my sponsor my way, and when she pisses me off, find a nice handsome guy and go cry on his shoulder and get lots of sympathy and attention for what a biatch she is, and all the little games that we can do as alcoholics. I was going to say female alcoholics because I can only speak to that, but I know we all bat your eyelashes and listen to this, and everybody co-signs my suicide note, and that's no joke because that's what that is. It's a suicide note, and I didn't know it. I really didn't. And I think I shared here once about in the 2nd step, the woman that I read with told me to cross out drinking and put thinking. And I kind of got caught up in my own hype, doing service work and saying how long I've been sober and all that kind of stuff. And then I got caught up in my own shame, and I would get up to the podium, and where it says we're the actor, I did this as well in sobriety as I did drinking, because I got up there and, I'd been married for 25 years and we were the AA couple. And we got a lot of mileage out of that, and everybody would say, oh, wow, you're happy and you're together and you give us a lot of hope. And I wanted that story to be true. But God, on a good day, I can really mean this, which I can really mean this in this moment, but in half an hour and you call me, I might not be feeling it, but I do feel it in this moment, which is that all the pain in my life has been a gift because it has caused me to sit up and pay attention. And that was what this process was for me. So about the 5th step, I took a long time writing my 4th step, and I'm not stupid, and I'm a writer, I'm not a computer person, and I go to meetings and I'd write little notes, and I had met with my sponsor and she gave me the clear-cut directions, and I made the columns, and then I made the columns a completely sideways way. Like, what? Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, I'm thinking I know what I'm doing. And she'd say, bring me your work so we can look it over. I mean, she was in the Army, so that she was perfect for me because I'm a complete left brain. I live in the gray area, and my papers are in my car covered with coffee, and she's like, you have really got to get it together. And I'd be like, you're pressuring me, you're so cruel. I'm creative, I'm doing the best I can. She's like, well, no. And then she'd explain it to me that, and I've always resisted, structure. Always resisted it, but suffered the consequences too, Like, I never read the directions to how to put things together. And then I'm slamming the video into the VCR going, what the heck is wrong with this? And it's like, how about you read the directions and maybe it'll work, And so she worked with me, and she gave a lot of her time to me, and she had a lot of patience, and she called me out on stuff I couldn't see, and what started happening is that just like AA kind of ruins your drinking, Big Book Step Study ruins your ability to live with your own BS if you really put your heart and soul into it and show up for it, which was important and has completely changed the way I approach my life. So she saw what I had for my 4th step. She told me what to do. I mean, I was so convoluted in my mind that even saying the third step, I used to say, and to help those, I may help those, right? Not that I would help those of thy power. And she's like, what? And I go, what? And she goes, open that book and read that third step again. Oh my gosh, like that is just a perfect example, you know? I thought it was hysterical when my daughter would sing Walking Around the Christmas Tree because she didn't know it was rocking around the Christmas tree, but being that it is a fatal disease, my stories were killing me. So, so I had my fourth step ready. By the time we were getting ready for my fifth step, I had it set up the way she wanted me to have it set up, and I could see the logic behind it as much as I resisted it, because I had my A, B, and C over here, and then I had my turnarounds over here. And I mean, I had to revise and revise and revise. To this day, it's like pages are, I mean, I still have it, and I cut the pages out and had to put them in order with corresponding numbers, because the first time I went to do my fifth step with her, I was so nervous. I'm like, okay, so I resent my ex-husband because, and she's like, so the turnarounds are, and I'm like, wait a sec. And she's like, you know, I don't have the time to watch you go through all your papers, and it was the kick in the butt that I needed, because I always used to think, oh, I don't know if she likes me or not, but I do know she loves me, because that's a huge dishonesty that I grew up with, which was, you know, be nice to everyone, but you would hate them, right? So I had to grow up and learn that a lot of times hearing what I didn't want to hear and hearing things that shot straight through my heart was the deepest kind of spiritual love that there is in this program. You know, learning to keep the focus on me too. I could give you an example of one of the ways that I believed myself, which is after my house was foreclosed on, I needed to go and find a place to rent, and my brother's always been really great with money. You know, he'd get a first communion card, a birthday card, and he'd go to the bank with his money, and I'd be like, let's go to Friendly's, I'm just going to treat you and you and you and you, you know. So he had a place that I could rent, and he would start asking me, where's the rent, where's the rent, where's the rent? And I was like, poor me, don't you know how horrible my life is, and F you with your little heated pool outside. You know, I had this, it was just like this grinding resentment, and so in my fifth step, what she was like, you know, I was like, I resent him so much because he's always asking me for my money. And the truth is, he's asking me for his money, right? So that's not in a formal big book turnaround process, but you know, it was when I did it. I'm just saying to you that, you know, if it's a quick check too, like a little short, I don't know what you call those, Cliff Notes. I probably don't even use those anymore because everything's on the computer, but a Cliff Note check for me is if I'm walking around feeling like a victim, or if I'm walking around clenching my teeth because nobody's listening to my advice, and you know, that's I know that I'm, you know, one extreme or the other, playing God or playing victim, and I'm not spiritually fit, so I need to do a serious 10 and 11. But that was my walking around life. I was consumed with myself, but I couldn't see it, and I didn't know it. So when I started to do 4 and 5, I would catch myself and react, because it took me a long time. It actually, I would drive down to Meriden, and I live up in Northampton, and so it was a commitment on both our parts, and it was not when I said so, it was when she was available, and she made herself as available as she could be while respecting her own life, which was, again, something that I learned from, you know. I would say the third step, we would say the third step prayer together, and then we would start. And she would reiterate and reiterate and reiterate to me, this is between you and God, this is between you and God, this is between you and God. And I'm like, but I'm talking to you, because I carried so much shame, you know? And she's like, she had heard so many fifth steps. She was like, it's always important, it's always an honor. But pretty much everybody's got the same story when you get down to it, with a few minor tweaks. And I found that to be true hearing fifth steps. So we would, I would start, and she'd be like, who's in the room? And it would be God. And I'll go off Big Book script for a second, because it is disturbing to me when I hear people with worksheets and these big I don't know, they feel like rodeos or something, like the circuit speakers, and it just feels off the subject of it being between you and God. I am not looking for a personality, and I'm not looking to be a personality, and I'm not a shrink. And so when I do listen to a fifth step, I say up front, I don't judge. I don't judge. It is between you and God. And if you get any sense that you think I am judging you, let's talk about it. Because the thing I had to do was, my sponsor said to me, "Am I on your list yet?" And for 2 years, I'm like, "No, there's nothing about you that makes me mad." And then, then I started doing 5, and I'm like, "Yeah, you're on my list." And by the way, who am I going to do this with? And she goes, "With me." And I'm like, "You mean talk directly to you about what?" She's like, "Yeah, because it's about you." Again, it just kept getting brought back, which seems like the obvious thing, but my alcoholic mind was sort of like a like a gerbil, just like going everywhere, which was also why I needed the structure. So the dishonesties I got a lot out of. I was saying things kind of by rote, and then, at certain points, and then she'd be like, she just had that intuitive experience and spiritual guidance to know when to say stop. Let's just pause here. And so, and I can remember vividly, it was a few years ago, being in the parking lot in my car in McDonald's, and the resentment was not a big one, right? But the turnarounds were so profound. I was sobbing, because I did not have any clue as to how much I hated myself, and how that's a dishonesty, and how much I compared myself to other people, and that my emotional maturity was that of a fruit fly, really, because I expected that if I liked you, the rule was you had to like me back, There was no "you don't like me" allowed in the whole scenario, or, all of those kinds of things. I didn't realize how fundamentally my reliance was on other people and not God. And that is what the whole step is about, is seeing the exact nature of the things that are blocking me from God. And in doing that, I realized that she wasn't my higher power, and I've had to actually pay it forward. That when I'm doing listening to somebody, step 5, and they're saying, "Oh, you're so wonderful," I have to go, I am just a witness. This is between you and God, and I'm not wonderful. Your God is wonderful, because in 5 minutes you're going to hate my guts. I'm going to say something that you're going to really hate, and I need to have the courage to be disliked, because if I'm not showing up for God, and I'm just people pleasing and letting somebody get by with something, I don't feel right about that. It's also not my job to beat anybody up. Like I've heard of situations where people feel judged, and that's lethal too. I've been in situations where I've done maybe a 10 with somebody, and they're kind of, shouldn't you be past that? And I'm like, okay, we're all spiritually sick. I just have to know that if I'm putting my trust and reliance on God, I need to, as it says, be discerning about who I trust. Because at the end of the day, I cannot hold on to anything, nothing, nothing. And that was terrifying because nobody knew everything about me. Why should they, right? Like that was my thinking was, I told the priest over here and the rabbi over there and my best friend here and my first 2 sponsors that, and so we're covered. And that proved to be another one of the fatal lies, for me, spiritually. So I got to the part where I was terrified, and I remember there was a woman that she had done this work with who was doing housework around to help her out. And I pulled in the driveway and I knew it was coming, and because the other thing was I wanted to skip the order. Like, I'm just going to do my dad over here because I'm in a real dad-hating mood, and then we'll go over here. And she's like, no, you're going to do it in the order that you wrote it. And okay. I'll put you more on the list there. And we got to the part that I really didn't want to. Because none of us, for me, I know my disease brought me to places, sober and drinking, that were profoundly painful and traumatic, and I didn't know if I had what it took to sit there and feel it and talk about it, because my superpower always my whole life was to be invisible. That's what I always wanted, and then I could flip the switch when I was dressed up nice, and then you could look at me and tell me I look great and then flip it off. So it was a big thing for me, was to be seen, to be seen, and even to be seen by God, but I didn't know it at the time. So I pull in the driveway. I'm a little, I'm late, which was a problem for me, and I ducked into her garage real quick because I was terrified. I was shaking, and I'm looking there, and they're perfectly hung up, which was great for my OCD, but not so great because it didn't give me anything to do to stall anymore. And her friend came in, and she goes, "What are you doing in here?" And I go, and I just burst into tears, and it was a real moment of how I see sometimes the anonymity of the spirit in AA works, which is that when people are aligned, with God as a result of this, or really any kind of in-depth process, they will turn up in your life and connect with you at times you could not have arranged or asked for even. It just choked me out. Because my thing was I was terrified, and I didn't even know if I could get those words out. And there she pops in, her friend, to the garage. What are you doing behind all those paints and stuff? And I'm like, I just can't do it. I'm supposed to go in there and talk about something I can't talk about. And she's like, it all came back to God. It was like, trust and rely, trust and rely, trust and rely. And so I did. I went in and I did it. And what was profound about it was when my 5th step was over, and I won't go into 6 and 7, but the sense of not running away from myself was undescribable. I had put so much energy into avoiding bill collectors and my ex-husband and whoever else, my family and, whoever. It was very consuming of my energy and time. It was a great distraction, and sort of another addiction was to be outwardly focused on all that drama. But I didn't realize how that internal shame and storytelling and all of that stuff made me unavailable to everything good in life. And I was thinking it was all of that stuff out there. But what it was the blockage between me and God. I wasn't even able to show up, I would go places to try to meditate, and it would be like in my head, And of course I couldn't do 11 because I hadn't done the other stuff, So, yeah, so it's a profound thing, and what's that? I also know that if I am aligned with God, if I'm listening to someone's vibe and they're not showing up, with the spirit of being all in, I don't feel all in either. And that's okay, because there's a lot of people that want to be all in. And there's a lot of people that want to do the work. And I was, thank God for the guidance of people who've been in front of me, in that I'm not helping it by sitting there listening to you talk about how much you hate your boyfriend. Mm-hmm. I'm not helping you, I'm signing your suicide note. That's how I see it, and I know that sounds dramatic, but it's not dramatic when you've been sober 33 years and you've watched people sober 25 years blow their brains out and stuff like that. It happens, and it's not always because they didn't do Big Book, but I think that the principles of the program around finding somebody trustworthy to unload all that stuff in the presence of a loving and forgiving God, I think there's a reason that changes everything, and then sets you up to be able to make amends. And so, like I said, having the courage to show up can only be God-given. And I had to repeat those things all the time. And there is one power, and that is God. And God can relieve me from myself and relieve me of my alcoholism. And I need to be 50% of the equation, So that was another thing I got out of my fifth step. All the magical crap I had in my apartment, like this and that, and I'm going to be like manifesting, and this is what's going to happen, which is, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but for me, it tuned into my dishonest sense of playing God and not wanting to do the hard work, of confronting myself. And I wanted to throw around my sage and have God magically go, poof, your life is better. So I'm really grateful to have been able to come here today, and I'm especially grateful to the women that listened to my fifth step and loved me enough to tell me the truth, and loved me enough to tell me things like, the less of you involved in situations looks like the better. And I'd be like, the pains of growing up, right? Yeah. And I would say, what can I get for you for Christmas? Like, what can I do? Can I build you a house or something? Like, I felt like I didn't have any way to repay them. And sincerely, they said, pay it forward. And sincerely, I know what that means, because listening and working with other women is the closest I feel to God, really, because it is. What can I say? I'm not by myself. I'm being of service, and I'm saying what I need to hear, and it makes me accountable to live it too. So that's all for me. Thank you.